It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.
George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
High on crack, toting a machine gun, what could possibly go wrong? Like drunken sailors, the United States is drunk on its own hubris and power. It is cascading around the globe, not just now in the Caribbean, but in the last hours, boarding not one, but two Russian oil tankers, all because they've been to Venezuela. They're cruising for a bruising and they are bound to get it. It's all coming up here on the mother of all talk shows. Stay tuned.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
That wonderful line, high on crack, toting a machine gun, comes, of course, from Prince, the Prince of Peace, whom I knew and who played his song against the Iraq War, which I will never forget, directly, personally, to me in a London hotel room. Prince was right, high on crack, toting a machine gun spells disaster. But that's what the United States is currently on. They're on crack, the crack of their own hubris, all the Rambos, seals, penguins, dolphins, all the paraphernalia of United States military worship are all over the internet and all over the head of the people in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump's even traveling with not just Jeffrey Epstein's next-door neighbor, what could possibly be wrong with that, but Lindsey Graham, who has effectively become the number 2 man in foreign policy decisions in the United States of America. They're there with the media egging them on, they are, well, aroused. They are hard, erect at the possibility of whom they're going to attack next. Sometimes it's their NATO and EU ally, Denmark, which would deserve it, right enough, having been the first country to recognize the illegal severance of the Serbian territory of Kosovo. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, they were the first people, first cab off the rank to recognize the completely illegal breaking up of somebody else's country. Well, karma has a way of coming back to you, doesn't it? That's why it's called karma. The Danish are now in a state of weak-kneed palsy, a palsy which is, of course, informed by the fact that if Donald Trump decides to land his Marines on Greenland, the European Union, NATO, and of course Denmark, will do jack shit about it. It's a truism that if you have voluntarily gotten onto your knees, if you have voluntarily made yourself supine, then the master will do what he pleases with you. And that's the situation, that's the contradiction that the European members of NATO are now in. They wrecked their own economies. For the United States, President Joe Biden, they wrecked their own societies at the demands of the globalized capitalist system. They have destroyed the morale of their own people, such that the possibility of European citizens joining up for an army that is dedicated to fight Russia are now close to zero. We launched Sign the Pledge, a no conscription pledge in Britain, and we can't keep up with the number of people who are signing it. My own son was the first one. He's going to fight for the Viet Cong instead. Nobody's going to fight for Keir Starmer. Nobody's going to fight for Merz. Nobody is going to fight for Macron, especially as on this very weekend, Keir Starmer reached the record historic low of 11% approval in the public opinion polls. So a guy with 11% of public support is sailing the United Kingdom into existential danger. A danger made more severe by Britain's collaboration, complicity, not just in sundry war crimes, in territory, in Ukraine, inside Russia, but from British bases in the last few hours on the North Atlantic coast. The idea that Britain and the United States of America could launch a military action against a Russian tanker lawfully present in the North Atlantic, lawfully carrying Venezuelan crude, which it is legally, perfectly entitled to do, the fact that Britain and the United States, deliberately because they threw the air assets into England in order to use England as the launch pad for this attack on the Russian tanker Marinera, having tried and failed to board it in the Caribbean, just in the last hours they have gotten it in the North Atlantic. But that is only the end of the beginning, because the extraterritoriality of the United States demand that they police any and all tankers might work. If it's a Liberian tanker, it might work. If it's a Danish tanker, but it sure won't work if it is a Russian and Chinese tanker. And now 14 Russian and Chinese tankers are either on their way to or in Venezuelan ports, as they are perfectly entitled to do. It is an astonishing thing for me that so many people imagine that the United States has the right to lawfully sanction people. It doesn't. It can sanction its own companies, its own citizens. It can forbid its own companies and its own citizens from trading with a third party, but it has no right whatsoever to try and extend their sanctions to other countries, especially when they're permanent members of the Security Council of the United Nations and when they are nuclear-armed superpowers. In fact, it's a sign of madness, and madness is abroad. I have never seen an outflow of, as I said, drunken hubris, of chest beating, of Tarzan behavior exhibited all over the mass media, including now social media, given that Zuckerberg and Musk and all the others are fully on board, having been themselves terrorized by Donald Trump. I have never seen anything like it. It's like the victory of the Taliban just a couple of years ago never happened. That's right. If you've forgotten that, it's like the United States stealing like a thief in the night out of Bagram with the sandal-wearing, Kalashnikov-bearing Taliban ragged-arsed fighters in close pursuit. It's like the defeat after 20 years of occupation in Afghanistan never happened. They are drunk on what they perceive to be the highly successful military raid in Caracas, to which I turn in just a minute. And as for the epic victory of the Vietnamese people, well, of course, that's ancient history for them. But it isn't, you know. There are many people watching this show who remember the Vietnam era only too well. There are even people watching this show who had to risk dying face down in a paddy field in Southeast Asia in order to fulfill the demands of the United States governments of Lyndon B. Johnson, followed by Richard M. Nixon. There are people watching this show now who remember the horrors of a war that cost the United States 58,000 dead service personnel, hundreds of thousands of wounded, maimed, and damaged survivors. And of course, they remember the post-Vietnam era, where more Vietnam vets committed suicide even than were killed in the action itself. But they've forgotten all about that. The fact that they were able to kill 100 people in Caracas, apparently, according to them, without reply. They killed 34 Cuban special forces, including 5 Cuban generals, without sustaining a single casualty. I'm already on record as saying that is literally an impossibility. I know the Cuban armed forces. I know the top brass of the Cuban military. There isn't any way they're going down dead without firing a meaningful shot in reply. But that's what Trump has claimed. So either Trump is lying about the casualty rate of the United States forces that attacked Caracas, or these Cubans and the other Venezuelan military personnel who were killed were not killed by the SEALs, by the special operations, by the Delta Force, as has been variously claimed. They were not. They can only have been in other circumstances had their lives cold-bloodedly taken away from them. It's one or the other. Either Trump's lying about the casualties on the United States side, or all these people were murdered in cold blood by somebody. And Anya Parampil, a great expert on Venezuela, might be able to help us with that. She's our first guest this evening, an acclaimed author on the subject of Venezuela, of course. But back to the events, let's call them that. The events of, 72 hours or so ago, when the United States captured, in their words, kidnapped, in mine, the legitimate, recognized president of Venezuela. This is an important set of words. The recognized, legitimate president of a sovereign state, one of the most important states in the global south, with the world's largest oil reserves, a man who gives speeches at the United Nations, a man who has state-to-state relations with 120 or 30 countries around the world. This was not some rogue leader that the United States kidnapped. And not only did they kidnap him, they kidnapped his 70-year-old wife, and they have severely injured her. They have broken her ribs. They have damaged her face and head so that she appeared in a New York courtroom with bandages around her head and strapping around her ribs. And the first action of the legal team of Nicolas Maduro was to appeal to the judge for proper medical treatment for a 70-year-old woman who has been taken entirely illegally without even the pretense of a legal basis for doing so. Mrs. Maduro ain't no narco-terrorist. Mrs. Maduro ain't holding any machine guns. Mrs. Maduro has committed no crime, so why is she injured in a New York penitentiary? These questions will be asked with increasing virulence and increasing regularity over the next few days. If I were their legal team, I would be moving a court action now for her immediate release on the basis that there's no evidence of any wrongdoing on her part, and that even if there was, the United States does not have the jurisdiction to attack with massive military force a capital in a foreign country and seize its head of state and its first lady. These are ABC principles which I'm finding it necessary to start teaching people about again. You see, we've grown so accustomed to the extraterritoriality, to the American exceptionalism of US imperialism, that even by default, even without knowing it, we begin to internalize a belief that they have the right to do this. And of course, they do not. Maduro's like a king. He's like a lion surrounded by hyenas. He is taller than everybody who is seizing him. He has more self-respect. He has more dignity, more bearing, more machismo than any of the pygmies that have seized him, including Donald Trump. Trump's rhetoric, you know, has become so unhinged that there must be somewhere in the United States government an increasing anxiety that this man has gone completely loco. He said last night that Maduro, and I'm quoting Donald Trump, had killed millions of people. He killed millions of people. It's just not in the indictment that the United States has prepared for him. What millions? Where? How? When did Maduro kill millions of people? He said that Maduro had a torture chamber in the center of Caracas. It's just not in the indictment. We've kidnapped him, but we're not going to charge him with killing millions of people. We're not going to charge him with having a torture chamber in the center of Caracas, which he then claimed was being closed down. He is pretending, maybe he's not pretending, our guest tonight will shed light on that he is running Venezuela through the acting president, Kelsey Rodriguez, a long-time Chavista, a long time assistant president, vice president, and comrade of Nicolas Maduro. Trump is deliberately seeking to convey the impression that the Venezuelans have agreed to stump up 30 to 50 million barrels of Venezuelan crude oil, give it to the United States, who will keep the money and use it to the best effect. I don't know if that's true. Don't know how it could be true. Don't know who could have made such a decision. But in closing down the torture chamber, the non-existent torture chamber that nobody's ever mentioned before, Trump is deliberately giving the impression that he is running Venezuela by Zoom, I guess. I mean, a Zoom call a day to the Miraflores, giving orders to the still extant Chavista Venezuelan regime. It doesn't sound likely to me, but definitely something funny is going on. That much is clear, and we'll try to get to the bottom of it. I have no idea how long I've been speaking. I don't have a clock, so I'm just going to keep speaking, because the situation now is that an international crisis has erupted in the North Sea. In the North Sea, off the coast of Great Britain. Keir Starmer, Mr. 11%, has been gagging for war with Russia. Well, he's just about to get it, and I hope the British people are ready for what comes next. If you think that Vladimir Putin is going to allow the pygmy Keir Starmer to steal a Russian oil tanker in the North Sea, you've got another thing coming. If you think the Russians are going to allow the camel to stick its nose under the tent as a prelude to being in the tent itself, you are a fool. You are drunk on the hubris abroad in Washington. It's the mother of all talk shows. I'll be right back with Anya Parampil. Stay tuned. I wonder if there's more to it, Anthony. She says not, but might she be preparing for a presidential run?
You very well may, but Americans don't like a quitter. So even if she was starting to speak some truth, we're not going to take that very well.
Fair point. Very, very fair point. But Donald Trump's political position looks to me now extremely isolated. He has destroyed a very considerable part of his most militant base. He hasn't just lost Marjorie Taylor Greene, he's lost Tucker Carlson, he's almost entirely lost Alex Jones, he has substantially lost the support of Steve Bannon, and many, many others are beginning to question his judgment, and some even to question his continuing fitness for office. So he's in a very weak position. But if he wanted to, he could take the bull by the horns on this Ukraine question. He could say, stop sabotaging me. Don't think by leaking things you're going to divert me. I'm serious. I'm ending this war, and I'm certainly going to end America's involvement in this war.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
This is the mother of all talk shows, and this is the mother of all talk shows poll, which is going great guns. 20,759 respondents already. After Venezuela, who or what is next for Trump? Is it Cuba, Colombia, or Iran? You can have your say on my Telegram channel. Telegram channel is t.me/George Galloway. You can vote on my X platform. You can vote on the YouTube community poll, on the YouTube stream, and if you are one of the creme de la creme, the vanguard, supporting me on patreon.com/George Galloway, you can vote there also. If you want to call the show, it's toll free in the United States and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. It's free in Britain and Ireland, 08081 965522, and the worldwide number is 0044 203 966 2625. Anya Parampil is not just a journalist, commentator. She's the author of Corporate Coup, Venezuela and the End of U.S. Empire, which may, Anya, have been a somewhat optimistic title. Would you like to address that point first? Is the U.S. empire ended, or is it currently running Venezuela? We can't hear Anya. We hope to get back to her. Let me recap on the poll. It may, of course, be none of those. It might be Greenland. It might be Denmark. It might be Canada. It might be Nigeria. It might be Somaliland. It might be Lebanon. It might be any one of a number of countries that Donald Trump has in this drunken sailor rampage, with little Lindsey Graham in high heels at his side, the cross-dressing sodomite Lindsey Graham, who never saw a war he didn't like, or a soldier, or a sailor, or an airman. Lindsey Graham is now running. We thought that John Bolton was a threat to humanity. Lindsey Graham is an even greater threat to humanity, and he's now permanently at the side of Donald J. Trump and making, it would appear to me, many of the most important calls. This last 48 hours, he was aroused at the possibility of attacking Cuba next. Cuba would, of course, be a much tougher nut to crack than Venezuela, and also strategically and historically a far greater moment to its allies, in particular the Russian Federation. Could Russia allow Cuba to fall? Would the Cuban people fold like a cheap tent? Did the Venezuelan armed forces fold like a cheap tent? What really happened in Caracas? When we get Anya Parampil back, we'll be talking about that. But the truth is, it could be anywhere. On Christmas Day, Trump attacked Nigeria. He attacked a place where there had been no recorded incidents of Boko Haram extremist activity. In any case, he attacked Nigeria without the agreement of the Nigerian government. It was an act of international piracy, as are the regular attacks that he's making on Somalia. He has, of course, been up to his neck in the recent maneuvers by Israel in so-called Somaliland to get themselves a base in Berbera, directly opposite the Ansar Allah armed forces of the people of Yemen. He has been on quite a rampage. He hasn't given up on Canada, at least a part of it, which would probably vote to join the United States. I'm talking about the west coast of Canada, where energy, oil again, is in such abundance. He is openly stating that he's going to take Greenland from Denmark. And that will cause a crisis, but it will be a crisis of handbags, only handbags. because the European Union sure ain't going to fight a titan like Lindsey Graham. Anya is back, so let's go to her in the United States. Anya, I was asking, what's really happened in Venezuela? Trump is talking as if he's running the show there. Me, are claiming that the Chavista government and state is still in power in Caracas. Which of us is right and which of us is wrong?
I think you're absolutely correct, George, that this is a hybrid regime change that did not actually result in the collapse of the Chavista regime or even the regime that existed under Maduro. It simply swapped out the face or the head of state. And let's go back to that question you asked me before my audio wasn't working. You had mentioned my book, Venezuela, Corporate Coup, Venezuela and the End of U.S. Empire. And whether or not I was preemptive or optimistic in declaring an end to U.S. empire in relation to Venezuela. And what I would say is what I focus on in the book is explaining how the U.S. empire is centered and based upon the status of the dollar as the world reserve currency, and how that status and that the dollar's reign is based primarily on the petrodollar and the fact that oil producing states trade and sell their oil in the dollar, and that's how it's been since the 1970s. But what I explain in the book is how as a result of U.S. sanctions and U.S. financial warfare, many powerful countries, including oil producing and consuming states, have begun trading their oil in currencies other than the dollar. And Venezuela is among those countries because the U.S. made the choice to literally cut Venezuela off from a supply of dollars, thinking that that would force its economy to collapse. What that actually did was encourage Venezuela to begin selling its oil in currencies like the ruble, in gold-backed loans, in the yuan, and trading with countries like China, Iran, Turkey. India was coming in and buying a lot of the oil after the United States attempted to strangle Venezuela by refusing to buy its crude. And so this was when, at the time when I wrote the book, definitely that world and that alternative multipolar order was more on an upswing. And it looked more positive at that point when I was writing in 2020, 2021, or 2022 even. And since then, things have certainly changed. The war in Gaza has really laid bare the sheer force and ugliness of this empire that we live under, and maybe has illuminated some complications in how we have traditionally viewed this empire. It's not just the United States. There is a sense, even in the United States, that we are occupied at the moment, and that we are linked with this bizarre genocidal state on the other side of the planet that actually apparently even has an interest in Venezuela. You had the Prime Minister of Israel, Netanyahu, naming Venezuela and Iran as the top targets here, and there's some pattern of the countries that resist this empire and also finding themselves at odds with Israel. But as of today, no, I don't believe that Trump and Maduro and Rubio are calling the shots in Venezuela, but that there's still a situation on the ground there that it's hard to judge.
If that's right, and I hope you're right, the whole, I don't know, braggadocio, the whole swagger of the U.S. on the kidnapping of the president of Venezuela and his wife is somewhat overblown, because if they haven't actually changed the regime, if they are not actually able to install a puppet, Machado or someone else, in the Miraflores, then all they've got is now a potential problem on their hand of Maduro in a New York courtroom. And I don't know, maybe the feminists will wake up to the monstrosity that Syria is also in a New York jail, battered and bruised and injured, because she's the wife of Maduro. Maduro in court, this seems to me not that much of a prize, could be a poison chalice for Donald Trump.
Yeah, especially if they don't get a conviction, which is very possible. I recommend everybody look at Max Blumenthal, my husband's analysis of the indictment against Maduro. He notes that the crimes that are alleged to have taken place appear to have not even taken place in U.S. jurisdiction. They all happened in Mexico, and they happened before the United States declared the drug gangs in Venezuela to be narco-terror groups. So they basically created a legal pretext since Trump came into office in order to go and retroactively name all these crimes that were alleged to have happened 10 years ago and make it as part of this narco conspiracy that the Venezuelan government is apparently waging against the United States. Is absurd. So Maduro will get his chance to defend himself, and it doesn't really... I don't know if the U.S. is prepared for that, but I think from people watching on the outside, there are still... from the American side, there's this sense that it was a rah, amazing operation because it was pretty easy. No American service members came back in a body bag after going into Venezuelan territory and kidnapping their president. And so I think that's given this sense of success among even parts of the Trump base that have for all these years been positioning themselves as anti-regime change war. Now they're even pivoting to try to say that this is success because, look, we went in, nobody died, the government's changed, and they probably believe Trump's narrative that we're just calling the shots in Venezuela now, but it's unclear. I mean, I'm sure that there is some incentive for the new government to play ball with the U.S. to a degree, but I don't understand from their perspective then what is going to prevent the United States from coming in and doing this all over again if Delcy doesn't give them what they want. It's a very tricky situation.
It seemed to me, I said this on Sunday, I say it again now, there is no way that what happened could have happened, but for treason in the camp. It's not possible that 34 Cuban special forces could be killed by the U.S. without reply, without even inflicting a single casualty on the U.S. The Cubans must have been betrayed somehow, somewhere. They cannot have been killed in kinetic firefight with the U.S. That ratio of 34-0 just doesn't compute. It's not possible that the air defenses, Russian supplied, over Caracas could not hit a low-flying Black Hawk helicopter. The Somali resistance in sandals with Kalashnikovs brought a Black Hawk down in the 1990s. It's not possible that the air defenses of Caracas could not identify and bring down American Black Hawks circling over the capital unless treason was involved. What's your take on that?
I certainly had the same reaction you did, George, and I can just say that I had the same questions. I mean, I think that was a natural reaction for anybody who was sitting in our shoes and looking in from the outside. My sources in Venezuela are adamant that what happened is that they were completely overwhelmed and unmatched, that they couldn't match the technology that the U.S. brought in order to jam all of their communications and all of their signals, unable to communicate with each other, and that they decided not to escalate because they didn't want the situation to unravel or for more people to die in that confrontation. So that's what I've been told. I think that they're going to have to make their case more vocally, or that they'll have to have some sort of investigation and present some narrative about what happened, because certainly from the outside it's very puzzling.
Well, as Che Guevara said, I have seen the graves of those who did not fight because they were afraid of dying. To say that you're not going to shoot a Black Hawk for fear that 10 Black Hawks will appear, or you don't want an escalation, is not just an absurdity in logical terms. It flies in the face of all the rhetoric that we have participated in and listened to in Venezuela over many years, decades in fact. The anti-imperialism bristling in Caracas just doesn't square with, well, we didn't open fire because we didn't want to escalate. Neither does the lack of communication. If I'm a man with a gun and I see a US Black Hawk above me, I'm firing at it, whether I'm in communication with anybody else or not. It's more than highly suspicious. We have to face the fact that something happened in Caracas, that Maduro was offered up as a sacrificial lamb, as were the Cuban fighters, who, just like in Grenada, by the way, were the only people who fought the Yankee invaders. The men who were digging the tarmac for the airport in Grenada when Ronald Reagan invaded. The only people killed there were Cuban fighters who did their duty until the last moment. Somebody betrayed them. Somebody betrayed Maduro. I wonder how Maduro is feeling about that in New York right now.
I would love to know, and I would say that we're in this unique dynamic where the U.S. has a total incentive to say that this is mission accomplished, this is done, Delcy is doing whatever we want, we had the CIA all over them, and we infiltrated and it's over, because I think Trump wants to be able to move on from this and declare mission accomplished. Now, on the Venezuelan side, they have the incentive to say that that's not the case, and that there's full unity behind Delcy, and that this was somehow possible because the U.S. technologically overwhelmed us. And now, unfortunately, because that's the narrative, I think there are some in the United States that are going to look at that and say, well, then why shouldn't we go further? All these people who warned us that they would fight back were wrong, so why shouldn't we just go in and take that oil? And I think that's dangerous too, because basically what my sources in Venezuela say is, well, we dare them to put boots on the ground and then we'll see how this plays out. But if that's, the U.S. can wage kinetic warfare indefinitely. So you can't just bet on your only line of defense being boots on the ground, man-to-man combat. And that's pretty much the read on the situation that I'm getting. It's that Trump would like to move on from this, but at the end of the day, actions speak louder than words. Are they going to lift the sanctions and suddenly begin dealing with Delcy? And if that happens, will there be an upswing in the economy that she gets the benefit and it's kind of like what we're seeing in Syria now, where all the people who advocated for sanctions against that country for so long now are advocating that for them to be lifted so that the new government can experience the boon of participating in commercial life with the West once again. And I would say, George, don't you think that these two cases feel very similar, the Syrian Venezuelan case, in the sense that neither moment when either government fell was the most difficult or dangerous moment that either government faced in this long period of hybrid warfare? Things were stable in Syria, and then suddenly we find out that there's been a run on the country and Assad's gone. The situation in Venezuela with the economy and with the streets, with violence in the streets, was much more unstable in past years. And why suddenly the government just fell in one night, or at least Maduro was removed in one night, it feels as though I said on the gray zone, as if the empire or someone comes up and puts a card on the table, and somehow that is how the deal is done. It's not. It wasn't an actual product of a real military or financial threat. It just seemed so sudden to me.
Yes, the two issues are intimately linked. They're very close in chronology. Also, it's easy to forget how recently the Syrian government fell, and almost fell again this week. The self-appointed president, Ashara, was hit by gunfire in Damascus this week. He's not seriously wounded, but he might be the next time. So these are, of course, turbulent and tumultuous times. Let's move on, Anya, if you will. I'm asking in the poll tonight, who's next? And we've got plenty to choose from. But the one that concerns me in particular the most, because of my long association with it, is Cuba. I was watching the revolting, repugnant Lindsey Graham on the aircraft with Donald Trump. He was visibly aroused at the possibility that Cuba is now in trouble. Your comments on that?
Cuba has been hanging on for years, and Venezuela being in the position that it did helped Cuba a lot. I think it depends on whether or not this Venezuelan government is fully abandoning its place in the region or not. And I think it goes back to the question of, has there been regime change? If Chavismo is still in power in Venezuela, then I think they can still maintain assistance or a relationship with Cuba. But I think Cuba, it's just a much more difficult situation, what people there face. And it would take probably less in some degrees to tip the scales there in favor of regime change. But at the same time, the Cubans are so disciplined and have been resisting for this long. I think that if anybody's going to hang on, it's them, because they've just, if they were going to fall before, if they hadn't fallen yet, it's hard to see how just one change of face in Caracas is going to make or break the Cuban regime. But I worry about Iran, because I think that's where the U.S. is going to turn up the heat and apply pressure in the coming weeks. I think that's clear. I think they're happy to watch Cuba just teeter and suffer, but they're going to go in with force, I think, and try something with the Iranians.
How's this all playing in Peoria, in New York, in Washington? How has it affected the standing of Trump and his current in U.S. politics? The midterms coming up in November, be with us before we know it. If Trump is defeated in November, he will be impeached, as he himself said this week. How does it all affect U.S. politics?
I think it depends on the immediate future of how things play out in Venezuela. Because if Delcy is to face a coup, if there's some sort of instability, if the country collapses, if there's war, if there's infighting, then this will be seen as another Iraq war style failure. And that could happen in the coming months, or it could happen years from now as the U.S. pushes and turns up the heat. And only then will people that are now currently viewing this operation as a success, only then will they say that they got it wrong. Because right now, I think if things stabilize, if they lift sanctions and the economy improves, then people might actually, from the I'm not saying that this is the correct interpretation, but I'm saying that the American public might look at that as a job well done. They got the guy that they wanted out, and things are stable. All of the people that warned about there being some crazy Iraq-style crisis in our hemisphere were lying. And again, it's they might not understand that Chavismo didn't fall and that the regime is still in place. And I even saw one reporter, an anchor with CBS, complaining to Marco Rubio that they didn't go in there and grab everyone. I mean, that's how some Americans are criticizing this operation in the mainstream media. They said, why didn't you go get Diosdado Cabello? How come Delcy Rodriguez, the vice president under Maduro, is even allowed to take office? So if that gives you an idea of where things are, it's pretty depressing.
Indeed so. Anya Parampil, thanks for joining us, as always, on the mother of all talk shows. Now, let me take a quick break, then your calls right up to the hour. Stay tuned. Fabulous. Two great calls in a row there. One from California, one from Orlando. I think that Japan is walking on extremely thin ice in the provocations that they are currently allowing the US to manipulate them into making. I've spent a lot of time in China. I was there just a couple of weeks ago. There is visceral feelings about Japan in China. Of all of the countries of the world, China will never, ever, ever, ever forgive what Japan did to the Chinese people. They murdered more than 20 million Chinese. The war, which for us started in 1939 and for you started considerably more than that, further on than that. Japan invaded China in 1931 and didn't leave until their defeat in 1945. They further invaded other parts of China in 1936 and they killed 20 million Chinese people.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
After Venezuela, who's next for Trump? Cuba, Colombia, or Iran? You've got about 45 minutes to cast your vote on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, on the YouTube community poll, on the YouTube stream. If you're watching on the YouTube stream, please subscribe to the channel and give a thumbs up to the show. And of course, if you are one of the true blues, the supporters on patreon.com/George Galloway, you can also vote at that ballot box. Let's go to London for the first call from Jaroslaw on Venezuela. Good evening, sir. What would you like to say?
Good evening, Mr. Galloway. Can you hear me?
Yes, very clear.
Greetings and salutations for MOATS staff and you, Mr. Galloway.
Thank you, brother.
I have a question. Do you think that after Americans going to seize the Venezuelan oil, they will then go after Iran because China will be cut off the oil? And as well, I got another question. Why UK is so involved in Ukrainian war? Are they after resources, or is it the territory which they want to seize before the World War III is going to start?
Well, on the latter point, Jaroslaw, I think it's psychological. Britain is such an emaciated husk of a country, such a pale shadow of its former self, unrecognizable actually as a country, as a state, as by every metric. Britain has faded so far that any opportunity to strut on the world stage is seized by leaders even as diminutive as Rishi Sunak, or as Donald Trump called him when he got first chosen by the Conservatives, Rashad Sunak. Go figure, said Donald Trump. That's how diminutive it got. And though physically fatter, Keir Starmer is of the same stature as Rashad Sanouk. He is a political pygmy. And so the opportunity to strut on the world stage, I mean, this yesterday, for example, was farcical. They brought little Zelensky. Well, he doesn't want to stick around in Ukraine, does he? And so Macron and Merz and Starmer theatrically shaking hands on a declaration of intent. What's the intent? That after a peace deal, that Britain and France will put their soldiers into Ukraine. But there will be no peace deal if that is the intention. You feel me, Yaroslav? It's pure kabuki theater. Russia will not agree to a ceasefire if the ceasefire implies British and French, i.e. NATO soldiers, in Ukraine. So that means if they are serious about it, that there will be no ceasefire, there will be no deal, and the war will go on. But then, you see, that may very well be their intention. As for China and oil and so on, it's important to keep these things in perspective. Trump says he has ordered Venezuela not to deal with their close friends, Cuba, China and Russia, not to sell them oil. Well, Russia doesn't buy any oil from Venezuela, so good luck with that one. Russia is not in a position to be sanctioned by the United States, and China is in a position to sanction the United States. China has enormous levers, you know. If Trump seizes a Chinese state oil tanker, China can do many things in response, which would be disproportionately painful for the United States. And that's without firing a shot. But it's true that China takes 80% of Venezuela's oil. But that oil constitutes only 4% of China's total import of oil. So that could easily be replaced. If China is no longer able to buy Venezuelan crude, they'll be 4% in deficit, but they'll be easily able to make that up. The problem for China is the massive investment in infrastructure that China has made in Venezuela. And if, on the orders of Trump, Venezuela is about somehow to renege on that investment, then China would have a very serious crisis and would be bound to respond in the highest terms. You, like Anya, imagine that Iran will be the next target, and so it may be. It's distinctly possible that Netanyahu, who's judge in the corruption case, has just been mysteriously killed in an accident on his motorbike. What's a judge doing on a motorbike? Talk about making yourself available to be killed in an automobile accident. That judge, there he is now brown bread. Does that mean that the case against Netanyahu is equally demised? We'll see in due course. I myself think that the US and Israel would be so ill-advised to launch an attack on Iran that they are unlikely to do it. But I realize that could very well be famous last words. After Venezuela, who's next for Trump? Cuba, Colombia, or Iran? These are the options. We could have had 10 options. We've only space for 3. Now, you can leave comments on the QR code. You can send comments on YouTube. Karaoke Star says, good evening. Starmer did not condemn Trump. That tells me that the UK instructed Trump. Remember, there is only one empire. The empire is still the UK. I don't know where you get this stuff, really. Chris Cox says Russia has a doctrine that says any armed attack on any Russian vessel would be met by military action. And Russia doesn't bluff. Get ready. I'm perfectly sure that Russia will respond to the seizure of not one but two Russian tankers overnight. Will respond to them kinetically. I've got no doubt at all about that. And the Russian Navy will now have to accompany Russian tankers lawfully plying their trade in Venezuelan oil and anything else. Or it's this camel with its nose in the tent that I'm going to talk to Che Bose about in the course of the next few days, because it was his metaphor. Scott Ritter, who's our second guest, will have a strong view on that. But no, in fact, it was Scott Ritter's metaphor of the camel in the tent. So Elvis, 2495, says, starting to think President Putin is a fool. He lectures about history and morality to Americans who simply do not care. And Sammy Gitt says, NAPO, North Atlantic Pirate Organization, needs to be taught a lesson. Cruising for a bruising was how I put it. Jeff Mansfield says next on his list is to invade Manchester and take over Manchester United. Victor Soma sends me $50 US for the show. Thank you, Victor, very much indeed. He says, keep it up, George. A big hello from Lebanon. The world needs you. Humanity needs you. I admire your modesty and humble approach. Thank you kindly, Victor. Eve is in Florida and wants to talk about Trump and Greenland. Eve, it's been some time. Nice to hear from you again.
Yes, thank you to have me on your beautiful show. World War III has obviously started, and I believe that America does it for two reasons. The first reason is that they cannot imagine that they can remain a superpower without the supremacy of the dollar, and they believe that Israel cannot survive if there is multipolarity. They believe that it's difficult to commit genocide and all kind of abuse if you have many leaders. So they want absolutely America to remain the sole superpower. Now, what's very unusual is Marco Rubio just says that we are living in this hemisphere, and this is why we can do whatever we want. And living space, you translate it in German by Lebensraum. Leben for life and Raum for room. And this was a Nazi ideology, plain, very simple. This business of taking Venezuela, Greenland, and so on. This is the Nazism started like that, and it's very strange that Marco Rubio used this kind of language. Now, as Europe and Greenland goes, this is the way I see things. I think I have answered the question: how can Germany commit suicide? Is economic suicide? And I think I got the answer. The answer is that they need, in order to raise a big army or to induce engineers to work for the MI6, they need to liquidate all the other jobs. So BASF, Volkswagen, all that stuff has to go. Now, if you're a German engineer, you work for the MI6. If you're not an engineer, you join the army. So Europe wants the war, and the deal is Greenland. The deal is going to be, we back you off. We back you off for a war against Russia, and you give us Greenland. That's the price to pay. And
we just lost Eve in Florida, cut off in his prime, but he made some very powerful points before being so. and I'm sure he may try and come back again. So I'll leave what I had to say to see whether he does get back. Now, a big drum roll for tonight's big donors, the big donors of 2026. Who are they going to be? Bella Belfon Rose, Robert Clegg, Dennis Freeman, John Brown, and the regular and legendary big donor, George J. Ashkar Jr. Please do become a MOATS donor tonight and give what you can to support the show. Scan the QR code or visit the MOATS.tv website. Coming up is the aforementioned sage, seer, officer and gentleman Scott Ritter, former Marine Corps, former UN inspector of weapons of mass destruction. He's up next. Stay tuned. I defy anyone to contradict the point that I just made, that every person alive today was born of woman. So why would we say that the people in the labor wards, in the maternity units, are people who are giving birth? Why can't we say women? Why can't we say mothers? Why can't we say women who are breastfeeding, mothers who are breastfeeding? Why do we need to say people who are chest feeding? All of these words, and indeed all of the trend that you say you dissociate yourself from, of transgenderism, transmania, I call it, are all taking rights away from women.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
So here's the poll after Venezuela. Who's next for Trump? Cuba, Colombia, or Iran? Get voting on these multiple polling places. And you've got about 40 minutes still to do so. Well, no war is complete without Scott Ritter's peerless interpretation and analysis over it. And increasingly, his purview is the world. He knows as much about Venezuela as he does about Iran. He knows as much about Israel, Palestine, Gaza, as he does about the NATO war against Ukraine, which is marvelous for us and certainly keeps him in great demand from me. There's scarcely a week when I'm not consulting him. As I said earlier, Scott Ritter came up with this wonderful metaphor, and you need to know the Arab world to know it. The camel always tries to put its nose under the tent, and if it's allowed, well, before you know it, it'll be inside the tent sleeping with you. And so the only answer is when the camel sticks its nose under the tent is to give that nose a good whack. Well, I wonder if Scott agrees with me that Russia is going to have to do this after the seizing of not one but two Russian tankers overnight. Scott Ritter, thanks as always for joining us. Let's start with the breaking news of the seizure in the North Sea of a Russian tanker, Marinera, going about its lawful business. The British and the Americans doing the fighting, of course, but the British doing the basing and some of the logistics, have actually literally seized a Russian tanker. There's got to be a payback for that, isn't there?
Well, let's just put this in stark terms. The United States is calling this a law enforcement operation. It apparently the Coast Guardsmen and other law enforcement officials are acting on a warrant that has been issued by the Southern District of New York, permitting them to seize this ship. The problem with that warrant is it has no basis in law. To affect the blockade of Venezuela, which is what the United States is seeking to do, to deny Venezuela the ability to have shipping come in and come out, to sell its oil as it sees fit. This is a blockade. A blockade is an act of war. There has been no declaration of war by the United States Congress against Venezuela, nor has the President of the United States sought out Congress for authority for the use of military force in Venezuela. And so there is no blockade legally. There is no blockade. People need to understand that. If there was, it would be an act of war, but there isn't. So there's no legal basis whatsoever for the United States to be seeking to detain shipping to and from Venezuela. Now, to board a tanker, regardless of the flag under which that tanker is sailing in the open seas, is an act of piracy. Piracy. It's an illegal act. Now, the fact that the United States has chosen to carry out an act of piracy against a tanker flagged legally under the Russian Federation, there's nothing illegal about what has transpired in terms of the transfer of flags from one country to another. Hell, the United States did it when we were sending tankers to Kuwait. If you remember in the 1980s, during the tanker war between Iraq and Iran, the United States reflagged vessels and sailed them under the protection of the United States fleet as they transited so that they wouldn't be attacked by Iran or Iraq. We did it. It's legal. Russia did it. And now we've boarded and seized a Russian tanker in total violation of the laws, the international laws. It's an act of piracy. If this isn't dealt with quickly, the United States will believe that it has carte blanche, a blank check to do anything it wants anywhere. Donald Trump accompanied this act of piracy with a social media posting where he said, everybody's afraid of me. Everybody's afraid of me. Russia, China, Iran, they're afraid of me. They fear me. They fear my military. This man believes this nonsense. And if Russia acts as if it is indeed intimidated by the use of force in the United States, this will happen again and again and again until the damn camel is in the tent. Russia's got to smack.
Well,
look, I'm an American. I don't wish any
a...
harm to befall anybody. Go ahead.
No, I understand that. But cruising for a bruising was the phrase that I reached for. I'm not an American. I believe that the peace of the world depends on actual multipolarity being asserted and being a proven fact. At this moment, the kind of social media posts, the kind of drunken braggadocio practiced by Lindsey Graham and Donald Trump in particular on their aircraft, anyone sticks a camera in front of them, they're ready to threaten anyone, they're ready to issue the kind of statements you've just quoted from Trump. Everybody's afraid of me. But what if he's right, Scott? What if everybody is afraid of him? What if the Venezuelans took a dive in round 7 last week? Have we been somehow fooled into thinking that there were powers in the world that were strong enough and had the will to stand up to Donald Trump?
This is a question that needs to be answered sooner rather than later. The United States government believes that the world is cowed by Donald Trump and the all-powerful Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, and everybody who attaches themselves to these blustering idiots. Let me just make it clear right now. I've always believed in a strong America, but an America attached to the rule of law, a constitutional republic that used its strength in legitimate acts of self-defense of itself and its allies against real threats. I believe that if we go to war, we need to win those wars. And in order to win those wars, we have to have the most powerful military in the world, that we should never engage in a fair fight. But I don't believe we should go searching for wars, and I certainly don't believe that we should be acting in a manner that it totally obviates the notion of the rule of law. We are a rogue nation today, ruled by a Caligula-like dictator, a narcissist who has created a cult of personality that moots any notion of constitutional law or international law. We are a rabid dog. Now, the question is, normally when a rabid dog is roaming the streets, an Atticus Finch type character will emerge and put a bullet in the head of this rabid dog. It appears that we're waiting in vain for Atticus Finch. Again, I don't want harm to befall Americans, but as you point out, if this behavior continues unchecked, it will not stop until the United States has pushed a nuclear-armed power, whether it be Russia or China or North Korea, to the brink. And then decisions will be made that will probably result in the death of everybody. And so if I were the Russian leadership, now is not the time for pragmatism. The notion that the spirit of Alaska somehow continues to live on in the United States, it never lived on. If anything, Russia should look back and realize that Alaska was a farce, a fraud, a charade designed to lure Russia down a path of passivity, making Russia believe that there was a light at the end of the sanctions tunnel if Russia could just find a way for a peace deal that will never be reached because the United States doesn't want it reached. The United States under Donald Trump is continuing the same policies of every presidential administration since Vladimir Putin took office in 2000, and that is regime change. We want him gone, and Trump wants him gone. Hell, Trump tried to have him killed last month in a drone attack. The Russians need to wake up. America is not your friend. America is your enemy. And you need to understand that and act accordingly. And this is the time when Russia needs to draw a red line. If you don't, then America is going to do something closer to your shores, then closer to your shores. We're going to challenge you in the Black Sea. And you'll keep backing down until there's American boots on the ground in Ukraine, and you'll be confronted with the need to either have a nuclear war with the United States or give up your goals and objectives in Ukraine, in which case it's all lost because you'll return to the 1990s where you're on your knees begging for crumbs from the American table. So, yeah, Russia needs to do something and do something now, decisive. I don't say it has to be resulting in the deaths of Americans. I don't want Americans to die. But it has to be done in a way that Donald Trump knows that he cannot get away with this kind of activity. Put a damn torpedo in the rudder of this Coast Guard vessel and leave it spinning helplessly in the ocean. Board this tanker with Spetsnaz forces and dare any American law enforcement on board to open fire. Demand the release of the ship or you'll blow the port up in England where the ship is being held. You cannot allow your ships to be taken hostage by the United States and Great Britain, and that is what has happened here. This is not a lawful operation. It's an act of piracy, and in the old days, we used to take pirates out and hang them by the neck until dead.
Indeed, pirates of the Caribbean is one thing. Pirates in the North Sea, well, it's particularly close to home. And Keir Starmer, who plummeted further to 11% approval rating. Imagine, a guy is sailing us into existential danger with 11% approval rating in the country. Somebody asked me in a call earlier, Scott, and I fear I didn't answer him comprehensively enough. It would be good to get your take from overseas on this. Why is Britain so involved in these anti-Russian provocations? Not just this latest one, but in military activity all over Ukraine and for a very long time. Right from the beginning of the coup regime in 2014. Why do you think the British are doing this?
The British have had an issue with Russia from the very beginning, back when they were competing empires. We only have to look at the Crimea War in the 1850s to see evidence of this. The great game that was played in Central Asia between the British Empire in India and Pakistan, butting up against the Russian Empire expanding through Central Asia. World War I. Many people don't realize the British landed an expeditionary force in northern Russia that engaged in active hostilities against the Bolshevik government. The British during World War II, while we were ostensibly the allies of the Soviet Union, were working with Polish, insurgent forces and banderists in Poland and Ukraine to kill Russian soldiers in 1944 and 1945. Joseph Stalin put Winston Churchill on notice. He says, "You guys are killing our people. What do you expect me to take this lying down? We're not going to." Winston Churchill came up with Operation Unthinkable, which was supposed to be the mobilization of 10 Nazi divisions in support of the British and the Americans to continue the war in 1945 against the Soviet Union. The British have been engaged in covert operations against the Soviets and now the Russians for time immemorial. The British hate the Russians viscerally. There's a visceral dislike for this, for the Russian people, for the Russian nation. So it is what it is. I mean, the fact of the matter, Britain is infected with Russophobia to a degree that's even greater than you find in the United States.
Sure. No doubt. Let's turn to Venezuela, about which you have had very strong things to say. I used the phrase earlier that they took a dive in the 7th, to use a boxing metaphor. I don't know who took the dive, who took the bribe, but somebody somewhere betrayed Nicolas Maduro, didn't they?
Yes, it's in the Ministry of Defense. The fact is, so many Ministry of Defense units failed to perform, and they're finding out increasingly that's because they had received orders to stand down. Anybody who hesitated to follow those instructions were subjected to withering suppressive fire by American military assets. We had areas that we were monitoring as we came in. If they were quiet as they were supposed to be, we didn't take them out. If there were people moving around who shouldn't be, we killed everybody. And that's the bottom line. We had access to the cyber infrastructure of the Venezuelans. We were able to turn out the lights when and where we wanted, turn out power. These things don't happen. The United States has been projecting a blow against Venezuela for some time now. And the idea that the Venezuelan military was taken off guard is ludicrous. Professional militaries with this much lead time should have had Caracas fortified like you've never seen fortified before. The fact that the Venezuelan president is staying in a residence for a sustained period of time, so long that for more than 2 months, Delta Force was able to do full-scale, mock assaults on a full-scale replica of this facility, down to every door, every moving part. How did we know that? Somebody sold them out. The bottom line is the CIA has been very, very busy in Venezuela. A lot of money has been paid out or promised to a lot of people, and the United States is acting as if we have control over some very serious people inside Venezuela, and we fully expect them to do our bidding in the near future. It'll be interesting to see what happens going forward, but there's no doubt, let me just make this as clear as day, the United States would never have attempted this kind of operation had we not had assurances from inside that people were going to take a dive in the 7th.
Are they telling the truth when they say that they are in control? I mean, you can see it. There's an incentive for Trump to pretend that he's now calling the shots in Venezuela. Otherwise, all he achieved was a bit of a headache in public relation terms with the battered wife of Maduro, and with Maduro, who's quite a performer, as you know, quite a charismatic and powerful aura about him. Having him on his feet in the courtroom it will be a headache for Trump. And if he did it all to achieve actually zero control of events in Venezuela, well, he'll look the chump. So you can see why Trump is preparing or is preferring to imply that he's now running Venezuela so that it can run properly, unlike the United States in the streets of Philadelphia, of course. Is he telling the truth is what I'm asking? Or has the regime just sacrificed the king in order to somehow continue on the board in its own terms?
Donald Trump is not sitting as the president of the United States of America. What I mean by that is a president normally has a cabinet, has a staff, has departments, has agencies that work in a coordinated fashion to develop policies that will be implemented in a comprehensive fashion. So that when the president says something, the weight of the United States is attached to that. So if a president says this will happen, it will happen because we have done our homework. We've crossed our T's, dotted our I's. Instead, we have a cult of personality where a narcissist has to be fed BS 24/7. How great he is. I mean, my God, this is a man who sits at the desk of the White House and has people lay hands on him as if he is a conduit to God Almighty. This is the level of stupidity and ridiculousness we have reached. He is not being well advised. He is not getting comprehensive assessments. He's being told that which he wants to hear by people who need him to believe that they're on his side, so he keeps them in their inner circle, because the second you fall afoul of Caligula, he throws you to the wolves. He's been lied to by his CIA. He's been lied to by his Secretary of State. He's been lied to by his Secretary of War. Venezuela, yes, the CIA bought some people. But as we see right now, the United States is not in control of Venezuela. We're not in control of their oil. We're in control of nothing but the rhetoric that comes out of Donald Trump's social media. But that doesn't control things a bit. I think we're going to find out that the United States, Donald Trump, has been lying to people about the degree to which the United States controls the events on the ground in Venezuela. It doesn't mean that this is over. It doesn't mean the United States can't prevail. But I think, look, Donald Trump claimed that he negotiated peace between Thailand and Cambodia. I made it happen. Peace. Well, we found out that nothing happened because he doesn't understand the issues. And they're back at war today and all this. He thinks things are happening in Venezuela that aren't happening. He thinks that by seizing Maduro, that will lead to a cascade of dominoes that aren't falling at this point in time. I think he's going to find out that Venezuela is a much tougher nut to crack than he's been led to believe by his sycophantic staff.
Finally, Scott, Henry Kissinger of the Iran-Iraq war said it's a pity both can't lose. In the struggle between Donald Trump and the King of Denmark, or Queen, I don't know what they've got, of Denmark, I'm entirely neutral. Denmark deserve it, having willingly become slaves of empire and being first off the rank to give their recognition to the illegal rendering or renditioning of Serbia and the recognition of the breakaway of Kosovo and so on. I don't care what Donald Trump does to Greenland, but it's undoubtedly causing tremendous angst amongst the European Union that they may have to humiliate themselves, abase themselves at the feet of the US empire and accept the invasion by one NATO country of another, by one ally of another, and accept that the ugly American has arrived in all his orangeness in Greenland. What's your view about that?
The United States government under Donald Trump has said that Greenland is the highest national security priority of the United States at this moment. Let me just make it clear. We own Greenland. It's ours. I'm sorry, Denmark. I wish it didn't happen this way, but it couldn't happen to a nicer person. I am gleeful only for the following reason. I pray that the Europeans follow through on their promises of resolution when it comes to responding to this, and that NATO is dead, that they destroy this horrible edifice, that NATO falls apart, NATO collapses. The United States will get its due. One way or another, this narcissist will not go down in history as anything other than an abject failure. He's an embarrassment to the American people. He's an embarrassment to the constitutional republic. He's an embarrassment to humanity. But sometimes embarrassments, there's a silver lining in each little cloud. And the silver lining here is the end of NATO. I said when Mark Rutte became the Secretary General that he will be the last Secretary General of NATO. And I firmly believe that those words will be accurate. NATO is a sick enterprise. It doesn't deserve to continue, and I couldn't think of a more fitting death to NATO than it consuming itself as the United States absorbs Greenland and Denmark throws a hissy fit and Europe collapses in conniption fits around them. I will laugh until I can laugh no more, because I despise NATO as an institution. I despise the nations that comprise NATO. And this is justice, if there ever was justice.
Amen to that. This embarrassment point you make. I mean, Trump's performances are increasingly unhinged. They are increasingly embarrassing. He said last night, even his own wife is telling him that he's embarrassing himself. It's unpresidential behavior, the facial contortions, the pirouetting, YMCA, dancing, and so on. He's becoming a parody of Donald Trump. Is anyone in Washington going to do anything about that? Tell him to sit down, or maybe even reach for the 25th Amendment?
Not now. He's surrounded by sycophants. These are people who, are riding the coattails of Donald Trump. Trump needs to understand none of them like him. They all hate him. In fact, they despise him. But they're going to ride the Trump bandwagon as far into the system as they can go before eventually jumping off. Trump has the potential of failing abysmally in the midterm elections. And he's already noted that if that happens, it will be impeachment, impeachment, impeachment. And if he continues to behave in an unhinged fashion, there is a good chance in his second term that the 25th Amendment will be instituted. This is not a sane person. This is not a rational actor. This is an unhinged character whose fingers on the nuclear arsenal of the United States, who's behaving in a manner which is putting not only the entire American population but the global population at risk. So, let him do what he does right now. There's a better than even chance that he will fail at the polls in the midterm elections, and that the Democrats will paralyze his administration and come after him. And, in the past, he hunkered down because there apparently were working synapses in what passes for a brain. I think anymore, the ability for Donald Trump to think rationally is long gone, and we're going to find people saying we have to remove him from the briefcase. And I think you'll see J.D. Vance and others step in and say, I'm sorry, Mr. President, you're no longer fit to govern. We're invoking the 25th Amendment. This is my hope. This is my dream. This is my passion, because this man must go down in history as a failed president, as a disgrace. Future students of American history must look at him, and he needs to serve as an abject lesson of what not to do as an American leader.
Scott Ritter, as always, a brilliant tour of the horizon from Latin America to Eastern Europe and beyond. We even ended up in the North Sea together. Thanks very much for joining us, officer, gentleman, Scott Ritter, here on the Mother of All Talk Shows. Let me take a call before the break. It's from New Zealand, and it's from John in New Zealand on US criminality. And it's so early in the day, in the morning in New Zealand. It would be churlish not to take this call. John, welcome.
Oh, yeah. Hi. It's 9:32 a.m. here in New Zealand, so it's not that early, really. But just a preamble, Netanyahu has been running U.S. Middle East policy since 9/11. The Trump administration is a Zionist one. Israel is getting away with genocide, aided and abetted by the U.S. Both criminal states embolden each other. Trump's piracy and kidnap echoes Israel's criminal assaults on Lebanon and Iran. The petrodollar is finished. The U.S. wants to bolster its dying influence by moving its oil companies into Venezuela by privatizing, stealing its national wealth. The U.S. is reasserting the Fortress Monroe policy once more. As we all know, Venezuela now has the largest oil reserves in the world, and the U.S., headed by Trump, wants those reserves.
Well, of course, I know and recognize everything that you've just said, but I'm afraid there's a bit of me that thinks that we are, as George W. Bush would put it, underestimating the life that is still left in the U.S. empire. And we are overestimating the new world that is coming along. And I know we talk, you and me, in the terms that you have just done, but it ain't working out that way on the ground. Just as Anya's book predicted the end of the U.S. empire, doesn't feel like it's ending to me. They've just seized a Russian tanker in the North Sea with the British collusion and collaboration. What's Russia going to do about that? They have seized Chinese tankers. What's China going to do about that? Unless the answer is something, and something big, then it casts a very great deal of doubt about the perspective you have just issued. And it's vital that we don't underestimate or overestimate either ourselves or our adversaries. Those who think like you and me have a duty to be dry, desiccated, unemotional, unaffected by wishful thinking, properly evaluating the balance of force on either side. And I'm not sure we've been doing that of late, and I include myself in that. The new world is definitely struggling to be born. The old world is undoubtedly dying. But unless there's a new world to take its place, that dying empire still packs a punch. John, thanks for that call. Let me take a break, and then it's your calls right up to Gayatri, who's back tonight. She was never gone, but we just couldn't fit her in around the table for technical reasons on the last show, but she is back. So if you want to see and hear her, give her social media news roundup. Stay tuned. I'll be right back. There's a legend on the line in Oklahoma. It's May on Trump. Welcome back, May.
Trump is using a magic 8-ball to make his decisions. He apparently has completely lost whatever mind he had to begin with. This is just ridiculous. Does he really think anyone's going to believe that? I'm here to say, and I'm here to join you and everybody else, the emperor has no clothes on. He's as naked as they come. And unfortunately, I'm pretty sure he got naked with some young people. And that is why he so desperately is trying to kill this whole Epstein thing. And he's just making it worse.
I'm wondering when Donald Trump knew that he was implicated in these Epstein files and what it was that he knew. That's the big question, because he wouldn't have been banging the Epstein drum all this time and then suddenly to pull the rug. That tells me that it was a late decision, that someone came late to Trump to say, you know, you really don't want to be doing that.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
$25,000 people have voted, not bad for a Wednesday. After Venezuela, who's next for Trump? Shouldn't it be what's next for Trump? I hesitate because our editor is a Fleet Street veteran of many decades and he wouldn't get that wrong, would he? After Venezuela, who's next for Trump? Cuba, Colombia, or Iran? You've got, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes maximum left to vote. Let's go to Mississippi, M-I-S-S-I-S-S-I-P-I, where Luis wants to talk about Venezuela. Luis, welcome.
Hey, this is Maurice, man. Hey, George, how you doing?
All good. Nice to hear from Mississippi. Go on.
Hey, George, we're locked and loaded. You know, I voted for Trump 2 times, and this last election, I sat out totally. I didn't vote at all because I started re-educating myself on the internet with great shows like MOATS, and I've come up with a few things. One thing is Condoleezza Rice, I call her a hair-headed hooligan. They tried this stuff with Hugo Chavez before, but they never grabbed him and brought him to our country like this time. It's just crazy that they're doing that kind of stuff. And then dealing with people like Hillary Clinton, I just think the bankers and the ruling class people are making a fool of our President Trump now. And he's not really, he's more of a WWE Vince McMahon wrestling guy. He really doesn't, you know, he has some mafia training with Roy Cohen, but he's still not quite there to run what he needs to run. So in my estimation, they're trying to use the Bretton Woods, the last vestiges of it, the Balfour Declaration and Jekyll Island to really make Trump into a pariah. And so I don't know what's going to happen to him, but it's getting really dangerous down here in the United States right now.
That's a great call, Luis, and I concur with it. He is a WWE act. Muhammad Ali was inspired by, funnily enough, a guy called Gorgeous George, who is Trump. Gorgeous George, the WWE wrestler of the late 50s, early 60s, is Donald Trump, even physically. Donald Trump is now a clear and present danger to the safety of the world, but also to the interests of the United States. And I would not at all be surprised if somebody took a pot shot at him. I hope that instead of that, he's removed by the 25th Amendment, as he can be, because I certainly don't regard J.D. Vance as the same type of man as Donald Trump. He has many other vices. He has many other problems associated with him, but he's not gone crazy. Donald Trump has gone crazy, and that's a very dangerous situation to be in. Now, breaking news, we're just hearing that a woman has been shot dead by U.S. Immigration Enforcement, ICE, during a targeted operation in Minneapolis. Federal authorities say officers opened fire after the woman tried to run them over in her car. The shooting is now under investigation, by the FBI. But inevitably, protests are continuing in the area. They're up in arms. Where? In Minneapolis. Stephen in Scotland wants to talk about Russia and Venezuela. Go ahead, Stephen.
Hey, George. Nice to speak to you. You're the Prime Minister that never was, unfortunately. And for a person that's visited Russia 2 or 3 times over the last few years from Scotland, which is probably unpopular, I've seen how the democracy and the economy works in Russia is absolutely fantastic. And then I look what's going on in the world. It's absolutely disgusting. These from America touching Venezuela for no reason whatsoever, that's one thing. And then we can look all around the world from Venezuela to I worry about Iran now, because now they're pumping money there to cause insurrections. It's the whole world, by the way, because I'm obviously from Scotland, the whole world hates us. And that's not true. That's not the people of Scotland, and it's certainly not the people of the United Kingdom. The projection is not correct. And then we're watching what America are doing. They're the gods of the world. I'm just like, come on, stop that. What do we need to do, George?
Well, it's not true. Of course, I agree. It's not you or me. It's not necessarily our neighbours, but it is our government. And we elected that government, even if only 20% of us actually voted for Keir Starmer. He is the Prime Minister with a landslide majority. So you get what you vote for, or you get at least what you didn't vote against when you had the opportunity to vote against. We've got local elections coming up in May. We are running the Workers' Party in key areas, and we are running in the key area of Glasgow for the Scottish Parliament. I myself am number 2 on the Workers' Party list in Glasgow. So you have an opportunity to elect me. But the first on our list is Yvonne Ridley, who is a truly outstanding figure, a woman who was recently arrested by Israel and taken to an Israeli dungeon in the Freedom Flotilla. Who wouldn't want Yvonne Ridley as their member of the Scottish Parliament? Well, Glasgow, you have the chance to elect her. And if enough of you do, you'll get me as well, even in absentia. Thank you, Stephen, on that. Let me give you some comments. Peace Before says, the Zionist billionaires only give the voters 2 choices for president, and they're both funded by the Israel lobby and Zionist billionaires. Debas Hisde says, Ukraine is lost. That's why chicken shit Trump and the zombie coalition of warmongers stay silent whilst harassing oil tankers. And Emmett Jones says, I'm shocked British citizens haven't demanded snap elections. Demonstrate like hell, but they are afraid to go to jail. And Lovatar, T-A-R-E, says, maybe Maduro sacrificed himself for his country. And Rupert199 says, George, that guy Lindsey Graham needs 1 day in the front lines and it will be forever a turn-off for his psyche. Matthew is in Ohio. He's got solutions. Let's hear them. Matthew, welcome.
Hello, George. Thank you for accepting my call. I wanted to point out something that I think a lot of people forget, and that is that throughout all of these conflicts, many people forget that we are all human beings. And I think the core to solving these problems that all of the nations face is to eliminate the false distinctions between people, right? We see Russians or Chinese or Venezuelans. But at the end of the day, in the final analysis, we're all human beings. And I think that one of the first steps that we can take towards solving the problems that face all of humanity is to recognize the horror of our false distinctions.
Well, of course, I profoundly agree with that philosophical, I would argue religious observation that we are all God's children. And it astounds me, as the father of 5 mixed race children, how obsessed by race people are. I was talking to one of my kids just today about this Elon Musk. This is a man, Elon Musk, who's a genius, who's reaching out to Mars, who's built the world's biggest and most successful companies, who is a scientific wizard. And yet such a man is endlessly fixated in the most perverted way on color, the color of somebody's face. It's astounding to me, Matthew, that so many people give so much of a toss about race. Final word to you.
Yes, I agree with you. And I think that there is definitely a problem with the concentration of wealth in the world, not just in the United States, the concentration of power. I believe that Jefferson was instructive on this in the sense that he feared and abhorred the concentration of power, whether that power be concentrated in the military or in capital. But I think that particularly for Americans, one of the greatest threats that we face, that any nation faces, is the concept of immunity. It is anti-American and it is anti-human. History has shown throughout thousands of years that as soon as a nation accepts that its leaders are immune to the consequences of their actions, that nation will always devolve into tyranny. And I think that we have a lot of work to do in the United States in terms of ending the doctrine of immunity and holding our leaders accountable to the people.
Brilliant, Matthew. So professorial in Ohio, and I think you've impressed everyone. You certainly impressed me. Now, on the podcast, top 10 we are now on the podcast, in the charts, in Bahrain, Uruguay, Kuwait, Nigeria, and Serbia this week. How about that then? In the top 40 for politics in Australia, Pakistan, Greece, Ireland, and the UK. Now you can download the MOATS podcast by scanning the QR code on your screen right now. I'm going to London. It's Nizar, and he will not be the last caller, but one of the last callers. Welcome, Nizar. What would you like to say?
Hello, George Galloway. You are my orator. Every day I look into your podcast and wait for you to come on the show.
Thank you, sir.
And I remember you when you were at the Senate in America, when you were an MP in 1975. And you were superb. You were fighting for the genuine cause of the people. You know, you should be the Prime Minister, I think, of UK. You know, you are something that people would listen to.
Thank you kindly. But in fact, I'm now in exile from the UK, so that ain't going to happen. Sadly, there are. I wish I could recommend an alternative to me, but I cannot, for they do not exist. But Nizar, it's so kind of you to make that point, and I'll let you back in to complete what you have to say. But we really need the support of British people for this show. Show the British state that has driven us from the land that you support us. We need your votes. We need your money as the Workers' Party of Britain. Don't allow them to extinguish my voice. That's my appeal to the great people of Britain. Last word to you, Nizar.
Thank you. And I went to the last polling session to do the Workers' Party, but apparently it was no joy at all. They didn't even come near enough. But, I'm sure this time there'll be a lot of people gearing for that. And I say long live Workers' Party.
In May, yeah. In local elections in May, Nizar, we're going to do very, very well. And I'm sure that my friend Yvonne Ridley is going to be elected in Glasgow to the Scottish Parliament. Now, MOATS, big donors tonight. You got a chance to get yourself into the exclusive MOATS donor club. All you need to do is pledge at moats.tv. Pardon me, just like James Glass, who's a regular weekly donor, thank you, James, Steve Hood, Derek Marshall, Po Tam, and John L. Mercer. Big thanks to each and every one of you. Drum roll, it's Rolf in Bermuda on Venezuela. Well, much closer to the action, Rolf. What do you think happened on Venezuela?
Well, George, what has happened in Venezuela, in my view, I think you will share my thoughts on this, is something that we've seen repeatedly over the centuries. If you want to see what happened in Venezuela, or you want to understand it, or what happened in Gaza, what's happening in Ukraine, you can go back to the 1700s, 1800s, the 1600s. How does the West create this garden? How does it create a garden? As you know, it's a term by Borrell, who was the former foreign spokesman for the EU, George. It becomes a garden because of the way it pillaged and plundered the global South. That's what made Europe that garden, George. It hasn't changed. What we're seeing is a revert to that. Default is what we're seeing. You were right when you talked about when you talked about the Pirates of the Caribbean. I thought that was quite apt. We had the extrajudicial killings of about over 90 persons in the Caribbean Sea. I say next act, we could maybe call it The Godfather, Part 4, in terms of what we saw the other night. It was something that leads us to believe that we are regressing humanity to a more barbaric time. Although the opening act was Gaza, that's still not being resolved, and the slow-moving genocide continues. I just want to say this too, George. They talk about the Monroe Doctrine, okay? We heard a lot about that. But I want people to understand, the Monroe Doctrine was about telling the Europeans to leave this hemisphere, we're part of this hemisphere, alone. Why? What they're really saying was, we will exploit the resources of this hemisphere, and you are to leave it alone. We will colonize it. We will dominate this hemisphere. That's what they were saying. I want people to be clear about that. I just want to also just say, I wish that heroic woman, Dulce Rodriguez, all the best. We need to show solidarity with her, okay? Because she's going to need all the solidarity and support that she can get. George, as you know, because you have some of this knowledge about the history of what went on in South America. The West, the Americans poured Nazis all through South America to snuff out the drives and movements for democracy and justice during the 50s, 60s, and 70s, George. Remember Argentina during the time of the World Cup and Chile, okay? Dulce's father was a revolutionary, George. He was a revolutionary in Venezuela. He was arrested, tortured, and murdered by guess who? I can't tell you the name, but I know this here. He was the president of Venezuela, this person, who was in turn put there by the U.S.
Yeah.
And it was he.
No, I agree. I agree, and I understand that. I understand it very well. And people who I trust her. And so if there's a disjunction between what Trump says is happening in Venezuela and what is actually happening, then my trust is with the acting president, Dulce Rodriguez. But that doesn't mean that we can overlook the fact that somebody, somewhere, with power, allowed all this to happen to President Nicolas Maduro. We don't have to talk about it publicly, necessarily. We don't have to highlight it, necessarily. There is, as Anya pointed out earlier, a sense in which Trump needs to be able to claim a level of success that allows him to now leave Venezuela alone, to now move on and never look a gift horse in the mouth. If that is the intention of Donald Trump, then let him pretend that he's extorting 50 million barrels of oil in the next 12 months, which actually would keep the U.S. energy economy going for 4.5 hours of the whole of next year. Would be $3 billion worth of oil. It's a big extortion hit. A lot of beaks will get wetted by it. But even in terms of Tony Soprano, it's not actually a life-changing or earth-changing or U.S.-changing level of money. And that's even if he's telling the truth that he's going to get this 50 million barrels of oil. Rolf in Bermuda, always a pleasure to talk with you. Gayatri, my legend, is in the studio. What's rattling, Gayatri?
Well, the day that the president of Venezuela was kidnapped by Trump, so a legitimate leader taken away by another country from his own sovereign country, it felt a bit like it felt so surreal. And I've been reading so many analyses on this, and I think that Donald Trump has broken so many records with this latest on Venezuela and Maduro. Recently, the U.S., just a few days ago, the U.S. State Department posted on Twitter the following, saying, "This is our capital, our hemisphere, and President Trump will not allow our security to be threatened." This is really, really clear language, and this is obviously taken from the Monroe Doctrine, which is, of course, the policy that stems from 1823, named after the then President James Monroe, who opposed European interference in the Western Hemisphere, which they regarded as their backyard. But under Trump, it goes even a step further. It's therefore accordingly coined as the Monroe Doctrine. Yeah,
that's a good line.
Here we are now. We have surpassed the Monroe Doctrine. We are now in the era of the Monroe Doctrine.
I don't think we should give him the credit for that, though. He wants to go down in history as the creator of doctrines like this. But I think it's important to say nobody has the right to assert their rights in other people's countries. You don't, if you are a state in the Western Hemisphere, you don't get to declare you are the power in the Western Hemisphere. We all have a place in the sun in the Western Hemisphere. And people talk as if the Monroe Doctrine was, handed down on tablets of stone by Moses or carried by Moses. People act as if it's the law. It was just a political assertion of intention by a U.S. politician, here today, gone tomorrow. Nobody remembers President Monroe. I didn't know until you just told me even what his first name was. So the Latin Americans reject the idea that they are America's backyard. And why shouldn't they? Who wants to be somebody's backyard?
Anyone's backyard, yes. The other one that was almost as if written on stone was the Jakarta method. Now, this is the purge, the anti-communist purge across the world by clear U.S. support and complicity. And it was coined Jakarta method because it was so successfully implemented in my country of Indonesia in 1965, where minimum of 1 million suspected communists were massacred, and therefore the U.S. successfully erased the political left and successfully reformed that country's, Indonesia's economy by opening up all the resources. The most important one, the Freeport, is Freeport. And this concept, this blueprint, this recipe was then replicated again everywhere. But the concept of the Jakarta method was so successful and was so known in the Latin American countries that the countries like Chile and Brazil and Argentina, they would actually have graffiti on the wall saying, Jakarta is coming. That's how perpetrating it was. And again, Trump is breaking records in this because this used to be, how do you call it? This used to be a way for them to do it. Now, of course, known for the CIA to have backed them, but at the time it was kind of a, we do this behind doors. And now Trump is doing it all in the open because he's very clear about his intentions and why he's doing this all.
Well, isn't that the point? Isn't it better for us that Trump is doing all this than Kamala Harris, who would have been doing exactly the same thing?
Yeah.
It would be far easier for them to conceal the inherent ugliness of what it is they're doing than it is with Donald Trump, who is Caligula, who is a professional WWE wrestler, who is a narcissistic showman, who is literally gyrating YMCA style in front of the whole world, whilst threatening death and destruction on everyone. So the ugly American is Donald Trump, and he's out and in the open. That's better, isn't it?
Yeah, because the whole point is that it has always been the ugly, but it was just covered in lots and lots of lipstick.
Indeed.
Indeed. So, just finally, who will Trump attack next? Right? That is our question, and we're closing the poll. What is the result actually? Who do the people think is going to be next?
Well, overwhelmingly, people think it's going to be Iran.
Yeah. So
Colombia is in third place. Cuba in second. Maybe a quarter of people think it's Cuba, but over 60%, nearly 70% think it's Iran.
Exactly. So Michael Piesga says the following: since the ships are already in the region, Colombia, Cuba, Nicaragua, and then steam across the Atlantic to destroy Nigeria, next stop, obliterate Iran again, and then head north to teach Russia a thing or two before steaming east to China, the big one, the big enchilada, right? And we can't get into this at this hour, but China being the big enchilada is still, I still see it as a point in case, not least because, of course, the Chinese representatives were there hours before Maduro was kidnapped. So there is something in it. And days before the Chinese central bank launched their new digital yuan. So China is still in the picture. So.
For sure in the picture, and we'll be there very shortly. It's been marvelous for us. I think chips for breakfast, Gayatri, because it's very definitely breakfast for us now. I wish you a very good night yourselves, and we'll be back on Sunday, God willing, with the mother of all talk shows. So we are on tour, and the tour continues. Stay tuned to the mother of all talk shows.
It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.